Awesome. So how are you guys doing? We're wrapping up this term. It's the last week of the term, and the next week is finals, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought this would be a good session to have near the end of the term to kind of talk about what do we do with these course evaluations. And I'm new, so I've met both you, Cora, and Selma, so I'm still new here. I'm still learning. I think every institution does their course evaluations differently, so I've had various experiences. Can you tell me a little bit more about how course evaluations are done at Triton? I've asked some questions and I've had some impressions of them, but if you could give me some more feedback on your experiences, I think that would be helpful.
Well, I teach the COL 102 class, and as far as course evaluation, my course evaluation comes out in the form of a written assignment. Excuse me. So what I have the students do is it's nothing elaborate. Just give me a paragraph or two. Let me know how you feel about the course, if there's anything that you wish was added to the course or something that was in the course and you were a little bit maybe uncomfortable with it, or you thought maybe it didn't have a lot to do with what you were looking for to continue in your future education, along your future education lines. Whatever you think or whatever you feel like could help with this course, even if it's something about the way that I presented it, just drop me a couple of sentences, some lines, and let me know.
Oh, awesome. So it's a written, almost like a journal entry, like where they're reflecting back on the course and the teaching that happened.
Absolutely.
Is that an assignment, or is that kind of done, is that something they send to you after the course is over?
That is an assignment.
Oh, okay, cool. All
But
right. Well,
generally, Erwin, they're kind of happy to do it, if you know what I mean.
yeah, they want points. Yeah. So is there anything that Triton does as a course evaluation? Like usually an institutional send out what they want to have evaluated for their courses?
I really don't know about that, but I
Okay.
always create a survey for my classes, which is not the assignment part, and I'm looking for the students' input. What would they do? What would they like to see improved, and what do they like from my course, so I can use it in the future classes or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A couple of questions. Is it too much work in the course, or what do they feel about the material, and at the end, what would they recommend me to improve, and finally, if something they really like, what's their best part of the class. So just a couple of questions, and I use a free option of the Survey Monkey, so it's really basic one.
Really basic, yeah. And then do you have them take it during class, or you just kind of send it out and they can finish it after
It
the course
depends.
is
You
over?
know what? If I'm in class, and I have a laptop, so I take the, I told them will let you go 10 minutes earlier if you finish that, because it doesn't take them to 5 minutes to finish that. So everybody will do it, of course. But if I'm not in a computer lab and I don't have a laptop card, I send them the email. So usually the participation is lower at the case because they don't get any points. But I just don't want to give a point for something that's really. They already have enough extra points for something else, for tutoring or other things.
Right.
Right now I send them the email, but I didn't get any response. They obviously don't care right now about that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of prompting and a lot of prodding at them to get them to see how useful these evaluations can be. But yeah, doing it in the class like that, I think, is going to be your best bet at getting the results or the responses.
Yeah.
Hi, Natasha, and then also Aaron or Keidra, if you have any information on the process that Triton uses for their course evaluations. I did have a form back in my office. It was a paper form that I was given and I was told that that was the course evaluation form for courses. Um, and this is my first official term, so I'll see now at the end of this term kind of how that process goes. But if you have any information, I haven't since I haven't been on campus for a while. I haven't really been having as many conversations as I normally do, so I have a lot of follow-up questions. But I mean, in general, it seems like when an institution has a course evaluation, it's what they want. It's the information that they want to get, and for you, the formative feedback that you want to get to help improve your teaching practices is kind of something separate. So like what I advise is sort of, what Cora's doing and what Selma's doing is giving out your own evaluation to tailor the feedback to what your needs are. So let me go through. Yeah, they have a paper copy. Yeah, I saw the paper copy during the midterm. Then we received the comments after grades have been sent. Yeah, for more information. Yeah. And then the paper copy too, like some of the questions weren't always like, they're not tailored. Like if it's an online course, there wasn't anything specific to, online instruction. If the textbook, the course doesn't use a textbook, so there are questions on there that might not be applicable. So even if you are giving out that paper evaluation, I still would suggest doing your own survey for yourself, and then you get those comments after the grades have been set. Because there is that, I think when you do tie the evaluation, built-in assessments for online courses. Oh, awesome. Because I think that when you do kind of attach it to a grade, you might get skewed results because they feel like, oh, I want to praise, I have to respond in a certain way to get a better grade. Okay, so you have to deploy the survey. So yeah, there's multiple ways in which to deliver the surveys. Hold on, let me go back to. Is there anything else, any other places in which you get feedback? And we can explore this too as we go on. And then at the end of this whole process of collecting feedback, it's like, how are we going to use this? What do you do with this information moving forward? So one of the schools that I worked for uses the IEA survey, which is very comprehensive. So I've gotten comprehensive reports back on teaching practices, and I've found two categories. There's the teaching essentials category that talks about what you're doing as an instructor, and then learning essentials too, where it asks questions of the students about how they feel about the course, how do they feel about the content of the course, how do they feel about the difficulty of the curriculum, things like that, which is all really, really helpful information. And I think that all of it kind of centers on and focuses on student learning, which is the goal. A good, you don't want too many questions on your survey. You still want it to be manageable, in which a student could do it in maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes to increase the likelihood that they'll complete it. So I feel like a lot of the IDEA survey is lengthy, but it does give you kind of some good focus for what you could include. So what I wanted to do is include this in like a Word document, but I'm not at my work computer has Adobe Pro on it, so I just had to take screenshots for right now. But you can see there's some general statements that could get you information on if that's what you're hoping to do in your courses. So simply gaining basic understanding of the subject, that's a pretty basic one. But if you want to get into specifics, like if you want your students to feel like a member of the team, you can include a statement that says acquiring skills and working with others as a member of a team. And then you can see, okay, did the students feel that that was an important part of the course? Develop ethical reasoning or ethical decision making. So in a lot of ways you can pick out these statements and to see what best fits your course. This one is on learning on relevant objectives. And here are some pre-made statements for teaching essentials. Like, did the teacher find ways to help students answer their own questions? That's not what that's a good question to ask. Demonstrated the importance and significance of the subject matter. And it's interesting because you think you're doing all of these things, like making it clear how each topic fits into the course. I feel like I do that, right? But how do the students perceive that is really interesting. Explain course material clearly and concisely. Introduce stimulating ideas about the topic, about the subject. Inspired students to set and achieve goals, which really challenge them. So I like some of the ones in the teaching essentials. So I can send this when I get back to the office and can do more of a Word document where you can copy and paste it. I think it'd be helpful to have some of these statements to put into your surveys. What other, like for Selma, you said what sort of questions did you have on your survey? Were they more open-ended or were they more specific to a certain point?
They're all open-ended.
All, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want them to answer whatever they feel. First of all, to tell me what do they like in a class. Is this appropriate amount of work in a class? Maybe too little, too much. Usually they said it's too much, but I cannot cut more. But I try my best. Also, what would I do to improve? Some basic, so I can. Sometimes I get good response. And sometimes they said, "Oh, it was too boring. I cannot do this. I don't like math," or something like that. But I cannot change the subject what I teach. It just that's
Same
it.
thing, or you're doing a more open-ended. And I think it could be good to do something more specific because students need to kind of be led to the response so that you can try and avoid getting those responses like this class was boring. All right, yeah, I get it, but let's dig a little deeper. What did you think more specifically about the way that, I'm not sure, math, the way that the assessments were given or the quizzes? You can be more specific and hopefully you can get them to think about it instead of just answering very broadly.
Okay, thanks. I'll try it next time.
Yeah, and but also at the same time leaving enough room for them to elaborate and then not making it too long so that they don't feel overburdened. So if collaborative learning is something that you're doing in your classroom and you want to ask feedback for students on that, or active learning, or reflective and integrative learning, you can certainly survey those types of questions as well. And I wanted to show you a course evaluation. So I've worked for 2 schools that had evaluations built in that we had to give. And those were complex enough, comprehensive enough where I felt that they were hitting all of the core pieces that I would want to get back, but then I worked for a for-profit school that did not. So I created my own, and I used SurveyMonkey. And this one was 10 questions. 6 of them were open-ended, so there was 4 quantitative questions and then 6 open-ended. I made all of them required because you can make the questions required in which they can't submit it without answering it. And I got 100 responses, and that was over 3 terms or roughly 8 classes. Let me see if I can pull up this link. pretty easy to use SurveyMonkey. It might take some getting used to, but once you do it, you can also copy over and use it every term. So it's not something you have to recreate can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I started off with how important is English composition to your everyday life, school, and career goals? If it's more important to them, does that change their responses versus is it not important? And also that gives me kind of helps me judge where on the scale of importance was this class for them to begin with. You could also ask, how much time do you feel you put into this class? Like, how many hours do you feel you studied for this class? How useful was this course for you? So I want them to feel like it was useful. That's a goal of mine. And then compared to other courses at the institution, how difficult was this course? I always totter between, are my courses more difficult? I always feel like I'm on the spectrum of more difficult because it has to do with reading and writing. And I don't teach in an English department, so I'm teaching students that are music students, business students, nursing students. So I'm always looking at how is my discipline compared to other courses they're taking maybe for their majors. How knowledgeable was your instructor? That's sort of like a benchmark. What perceptions of your instructor do you have of them being knowledgeable about their content area? And then the open-ended questions that I have are, what was most enjoyable part of this course? And I don't know if, we can talk about, do you feel like, what was the most, using words like helpful, what was the most helpful in the course? What was the most enjoyable? And you might want to try a few of these out to see which elicit the best responses. I kind of wanted to see what they found enjoyable because I wanted the class to be fun. I wanted them to enjoy it so that they were better able to access the material. If their guard is up, then they're not going to be able to really get as much out of it. So that's why I kind of wanted to judge if they found it enjoyable. And I always ask very specific, like what activities, assignments, discussions, handouts were the most helpful to you in this course. I think questions like this, I get the least response because it asks them to kind of type more. Oh, I have to think about which activity, and then they kind of, because I do get a lot of responses that are like none, nothing, everything. But I do want to know really specific things. And I can show you the responses too. Because some of them were helpful. I'll get the grammar packet was helpful, or they'll get specific, like none of the discussions, but all of the essays were helpful. Okay, that's a little bit more specific, so that's helpful to me. What activities, discussions, assignments were least helpful to you in the course? And then some was saying, if the instructor could do 1 or 2 or 3 things differently to make this course better, what would you recommend? What issues came up for you while completing the course? And that's kind of that's a good one, for Cora, their self-reflection, the reflection that you're having them doing, asking them what issues came up for them, because a lot of times, and then what suggestions do you have for solving these issues? It was interesting to see at the end of the course them reflecting back and saying, well, really, all of the issues I had came down to time management. Nothing was really wrong with the course. It was just my personal issues that have happened. So they were recognizing that their success was tied to all of these other factors, and kind of they were able to pull out where they needed to improve on. That was interesting because that helps me to learn where do I need to provide more support. I think a lot of the responses for question 9 had to do with time management. And if that's the case, then that tells me as an instructor, I could be really helpful to these students if I incorporated some time management skill building into an assignment. And then what are the biggest takeaways from this course? I like to always do that. What is your biggest takeaway? Because that gives me a lot of information. If they can tell me just one thing that they took away, no matter how big or how small, that shows me that they've gotten something. And maybe that something isn't what I thought they would, but it's something, and I find that interesting. So So again, just looking at what are their perceptions of what they've learned and what they've accomplished. So I have one question about what the instructor could do better, but for the most part, these are kind of student-centered, which even though it's not evaluating myself particularly, it still gives me it still tells me a lot about what I'm doing and what I could do in the class. So I don't think there's a wrong way to put your surveys together. Let me go back to my screen. I'll show you. I think for me as an adjunct, doing this is really important because when you're working at multiple schools, you kind of forget. Like this was in 2017 and 2018, and I had this really great experience and I remember it, but now I have these survey results to go back to, and it really reminded me what happened there? What did I do and how did students feel? So I'm really glad that I did do this survey, because going back through these responses, I was able to just refresh my memory of what my teaching is, what the students felt, what did they like. So they liked choosing their own research topic. Now that's something that I do a lot. I have them choose their own research topic because I've gotten consistent feedback that that's something that students like doing versus, I've always done reflection journals. So I've gotten between two schools, I've gotten positive feedback on the reflection journals, but then in other schools I've gotten negative feedback on doing reflection journals. But at least now I have all of this to go back to for the next time I go and I teach an English composition course. I can look and say, what were the highest impact assignments? Research. Okay, let's continue doing research in my composition class. So if you're using this feedback for the next term, you could also in a year or 2 years from now use this feedback. It's never going to go bad. It's always going to be relevant and helpful, I think. Let me go back to my slides. So putting the time in to craft a really great survey is going to help you. It's going to be worth the time and the effort, I believe. Because we need positive comments. We need the positive feedback to give us more energy, to remind ourselves of what we're doing and why we're doing it. It makes me feel good at the end of the term to read some of these positive comments. And it gives me the momentum to keep going and to apply myself even more and to push further with my teaching. So here are just a couple of positive comments that I thought I was really able to gain some sort of energy from it. I've learned so much from the professor course, especially how to write a research paper. This course was very hard, but I liked that the professor challenged us, the students, to be more responsible and to learn the material. She's an awesome professor. I liked in this comment where she mentioned the material being hard, but that it was challenging, that she understood that she was being challenged and that I was pushing her to be responsible for her own learning. So in looking through course evaluations and the feedback, reading being hard, research project was hard. Like I kind of do get that feedback a lot, but it was good in this comment to see that feedback, but then also to see that she understood where I was kind of going with that, with the challenge, having a reading or an assignment being more challenging. That kind of helped me to kind of think, where am I going with this in the future? And really it's about trial and error with anything. You make little small changes and you see how that works and you pull back and say, okay, maybe I went too hard this term and I need to come back from that. This other comment, the professor is very professional with her students. She's very passionate about teaching and challenging the students to learn the material, in which I love because it makes me grow and to become a better student. And that's just like good positive affirmations to you when you have to wake up every day and go into the classroom, you're not going to be super excited every single day. So I think taking moments out to reflect on, the positive changes that you're having in the classroom is really important. We also need constructive feedback. Not all feedback is constructive. So having comments like, had a hard time with research topic on paper, could use a bit more explanation on the topics. Like, that was so constructive for me because it was a specific assignment and it was a specific part of that assignment and even a suggestion for what she or he needed, like more explanation. This next comment, having less work outside of the class and more work inside the class, even though it's not as clear, I thought that that was still constructive. Obviously, it might look like they just want to not do homework. It kind of reads less homework, let's do our work in class. But I kind of saw through that, and I saw a need to start more of the assignments in class to give them the momentum that they need for that outside of class time. So that comment to me was really constructive and helpful. What's not constructive or helpful are things like, I liked the journal assignments. Like, that's helpful, but at the same time, I would have wanted to know more. Like, is there a specific journal or what specifically about them? And that sort of specificity can come with your prompting them or taking 5 minutes before giving out the survey or in an email when you give out the survey, give a paragraph explanation of what you would like to see have happen on the survey, prompting them to be specific and give examples when they can, and how that's really going to help you. An improvement here, a student says, the overall class structure could use some improvement. Well, class structure is vague. That could mean anything. That could be in class time, that could be homework time, that could be grading scale, things like that. So we do receive non-constructive feedback that is vague and almost too vague, in which you can't pull a lot of information from it. But we can do our best, because even though the student feedback we're receiving isn't always perfect, we can pull lessons and we can learn from it nonetheless. So I've pulled some examples of feedback in which that I was able to get some really good feedback and that I was able to use moving forward. So let me go through a few of these. Does anyone find it difficult sometimes to go through student feedback? Almost like you get sort of cringe-worthy responses where you're like, oh, you didn't read the handout I gave out, or if they're saying something's confusing and you're like, but I gave you this whole example. It can be frustrating, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it happens to me too. They don't read the instruction and now sometimes complain about something it's missing. So
yeah,
I don't know why, but I guess they need to read it from the scratch. So
yeah, exactly. I get that a lot too. Like here, this one says she needs to be better at explaining what she wants the students to do. So for all of these on this page, this was for online instruction or hybrid instruction, where I only had an hour and 25 minutes with the students. So majority of clarifying any sort of additional instruction that had to come outside of that hour were through emails, announcements, things like that. So here she says she needs to be better at explaining what she wants the students to do. She writes these long emails or announcements, and when you're done reading them, you're more confused than when you started. So then I was like, so tough, because most of what I'm giving is in written form, but then reading that is causing confusion, and I have to start over with more. So this gave me an insight into what can I do to kind of provide clarity without giving out more written instructions. So that's when I kind of thought, oh, you know what would be really helpful is like a video announcement, or with all of the things I would normally say in an email, but just in a video format. And that idea came from this comment. And I think that was a really good change to my online teaching. The next one talks about course structure. So I felt this class could be condensed into 3 weeks rather than the 6. It seemed slow paced compared to the previous class, not as much discussion interaction as I like to keep me engaged. I felt it actually lacked a bit. The information is important to be able to write papers and research, but definitely not the worth the 6-week course. So obviously I'm like, well, no, we would never put a 6-week class into 3 weeks. And this course was for a 1 credit hour research course that I taught alongside student success course that was a 5 credit hour. So the comparison here is they're comparing it to a 5 credit hour class. So what that told me was, and both me and other instructors of the course realized that the advisors were not telling, or not that they weren't telling, but they weren't emphasizing that the class that they were enrolling students in was 1 credit hour. And we as instructors could go in and define that and say, hi, you're in this 1 credit hour class. It is much different than a 5 credit hour class. You're only having 1 discussion per week. You're gonna, the assignments are minimal. It's just different. When you were only earning 1 credit, the workload is different. So comments like these helped me understand and reiterate, or just kind of proved that there was confusion with the course being 1 credit hour. Not that we would change it from a 6-week to a 3-week course or anything like that, but we can clearly explain, why is the 6-week class slow? Like, it feels slower because you're only earning 1 credit hour. So yeah, that was helpful. I get this comment all the time. I felt like it was too much reading for small assignments. So I consistently get the same feedback. Too much reading, too much reading, too much reading. And I've verified with the department, like I ask other people, how much reading are you? I kind of do talk to people and see, am I assigning too much reading? Because I want to take those comments seriously. But at the same time, I'm kind of, well, it's a reading class. You're going to have to read. How much is too much reading for you? But, I kind of, in the way that the person said 4 small assignments made me realize that maybe I'm not matching up or comparing. You're reading a whole chapter right now because you're going to need more information in order to write your analysis essay. Or, I'm not really explaining why that chunk of reading is larger. Like, for example, the one unit we do has 4 chapters of a novel. Okay, wow, 4 chapters of a novel, that's so much more than a short story. Did I clearly explain why I did 4 chapters and not 2? Why didn't I do 1 chapter? So I think that was helpful. In general, it's hard. How much reading do you assign? What is necessary? And then asking this question makes me think, is 4 chapters necessary? And if so, I need to provide that rationale for students. So there I was kind of able to take some meaning out of these comments that it was too much. And in general, we do understand, I do understand students have a lot of classes, sometimes they're working, they have other obligations. So how can I help them to understand why what I'm having them do is worthwhile to them? Journal topics were not interesting. This is one, so for here, the journal topics were posted to the discussion board. So having to comment on others' journals on the discussion board wasn't possible because people waited to turn in the assignment before class. And one of the biggest struggles that I have with online, and I think we're seeing this now with moving to remote learning and having students, if you're having students use discussion boards, how do you facilitate a discussion board of where it's going to be productive? That's been one of my struggles. But here we've got the journal topics were not interesting. So that's really tough because, yeah, which one wasn't interesting? Why wasn't it interesting to you? And then I thought, even if the student isn't finding it interesting and others aren't commenting, I need to be there to comment, that I need to step in and be that person to respond and to ask more questions to make it, to kind of pique their interest in what they're saying. So I can step it up in my feedback to them on the discussion boards. And not, maybe that won't solve the problem, but at least that's something that I can improve on, is my interactions on the discussion boards. This last one, still unsure what the class was supposed to teach me. Oh, did they come to class? Were they sleeping?
That is not.
That's a hard one, right? And then I thought, well, in the beginning of the term, when we go over the syllabus, we go over the objectives. Here are the objectives for the course. And I've started to now, but I don't always every term. It's hard to remember. It's hard to, when we're wrapping up research papers, to kind of stop and do this. But do I ever go back to those objectives at the end of the course to say, hey, in the beginning, week 1, this is what I said we were going to learn. Now we're in week 10, the end. Do you guys see that we did cover all of these areas? I mean, I hope that maybe that would help, and they can stop and say, oh yeah, we did do that, and that. I mean, some of the course objectives are skill-based, so they're not seeing exactly how, like, the topics we're discussing fit into a certain, like, skill. Well, by reading this reading and that reading, writing this essay, now you can see how you're better able to analyze or build your analysis or analyzing skills. So I think by having that conversation, it could hopefully eliminate some of this, like, I'm unsure of what this class was supposed to teach me. Hopeful, but something, right? And it just reminds you too of, like, and after teaching enough times and getting more feedback, you kind of start to see, yes, it would be worth my time to do something like that, going over the objectives at the end of the course. Whereas in the beginning, I probably wouldn't even think twice about it. But after hearing enough times, like, now I know it's probably going to be worth my time. Let's see. Here was some for face-to-face classes. So these 2 comments came from the survey that I previewed earlier. What was least helpful? Assignments, period. Oh, okay. Was the least helpful. So initially I'm like, okay, everything. But then he goes on to say, because it became too overwhelming, but still made it through. Okay, how can I break down the assignments to where they're not going to be overwhelming? Even though, you know, school might, for him or her right now, might be overwhelming in general, I still don't want people to feel overwhelmed. So over time, I've taken a larger project, like a research paper, and broken it down into smaller parts over the entire term versus working on the research paper at the very end in the last 3 weeks. So I've tried different things like that to try and make it less overwhelming, you know. Here's an interesting comment on what needs improvement that I found creative. There was a lack of fluidity in the course. I did not feel a culminating energy towards our major projects. However, in hindsight, I understand the curriculum structure. I didn't exactly, yeah, I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know exactly what to make of it when I first read it. Fluidity.
Was that a professor?
I think I know. No, I think it was just a creative, very, I think I know who it was, and I appreciated him. Yeah, it was, yeah, I appreciated him, but he was very interesting. So, like, it's easy, though, to blow past something like that and just think, like, oh, it's an idiosyncrasy, you know, an idiosyncratic student kind of just being himself or herself or whatever. But I kind of liked how the idea of this culminating energy towards a major project, and I think what he means is, or what he could be alluding to, is a theme-based. Like, for this composition class, it wasn't taught using themes, where in other courses I've moved to theme-based units. So I thought, well, that's interesting. If I did build themes throughout the course that we read and then wrote about, maybe that would add this culminating energy that would lead up to a major project, instead of it being delineated by skill. Like now we're working on certain skills throughout the course. We can work through these skills in terms of a theme. I don't know if that's what he meant, but that's kind of what I got out of it. And I have tried that, and it works sometimes, it doesn't in other cases. But yeah, it's all about, getting new ideas, seeing, trying new things, reassessing at the end of that, and keeping some and throwing some out. But it's a practice that we're building over time. So everything that we try, even if it fails, either it flops 100%, or kind of works a little bit, but not, but needs improvement, I think is all helpful in the end. Let me see. Before I move on to the quantitative part, is there any other examples that you can think of major changes or insights or new assignments or anything that you kind of has come out of a survey or an evaluation that you've given? Like for Cora, like when you read through the students' essays, is it reaffirming? Is it nice to hear kind of what the students have gotten from you?
It's nice to hear what they have gotten, but I would like to say that there will always be students in the class that will not draw back from saying what they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
They are not good at saying what they think you want to hear, because possibly they do not care, but they pretty much let you know what they think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a comment about something about my teaching, which I know that I'm supposed to reflect on that part of the class, on my teaching practices,
Mm-hmm.
I welcome it. And it's just one of those things. I was surprised because I thought I was going to get another. When I first started to teach this class, I was surprised to learn that the reflection was part of the course, like an
Interesting.
assignment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm that comfortable with that, and I intend to see if I can change that.
I think it
But if
serves a
it,
purpose, but at the same time, I would still want some other option that's anonymous. I think that
right,
anonymity is good in terms of
yeah,
the data collection. Yeah.
I do use an survey since I don't give them a credit for that. But
Mm-hmm.
since I'm doing this in class, if they have computers, they get 10 minutes extra of the break. So I think they are so eager to do that. So.
Yeah, and I do that too, and I just say, okay, raise your hand when you're done, and I jot their name down, or I say, show me the thank you for submitting screen, and then they get that extra credit. But I do prompt them before I hand it out or give it out, and I give them an example of what a non-productive comment would be and how to rephrase it as a productive comment, and kind of telling them non-productive comments are not helpful in terms of, I hated everything. Teacher wasn't funny. And I tell them, like, it's non-productive for me, and it's a waste of your time writing that, when you can elaborate or you can write something that would actually give me a lot of really helpful feedback, like,
right.
yeah, like couldn't connect. I don't know, like, I just, sometimes I'll tell them, I'm like, I know my jokes aren't that funny, but please let me know, how I can help you, connect with me on a different level or whatnot. But yeah, because you'll get those. You'll get just didn't like. I got one time like has a lot of papers. I was like, oh, like that's not helpful. But if you wrote like teacher felt disorganized or something, like, then I'd be like, okay, that's different than me just having a lot of papers in my bag. So yeah, I give them an example of like what sort of non-productive feedback, which wouldn't be helpful to me, and hopefully that makes them think more about how they're phrasing things and the feedback that they're giving. And because I teach writing, it's helpful because I say, you know, please be detailed, use all the things we've been talking about in class, so that you're clearly communicating what you mean. So it kind of fits in with that. But what about the quantitative measures? So using quantitative measures is helpful because you can easily identify trends in the responses. So you can see an upward tick of most students felt this course was really hard this term if you use a quantitative measure versus an open-ended response. And then you can also use these responses to support feedback found in a qualitative section. So if students are saying the reading is too hard, or if the students are saying, the course is disorganized, a quantitative measure might help support that versus, oh, it's easy to dismiss it as, oh, one student felt like that, or that student wasn't paying attention, or that student didn't attend class that day. But a quantitative measure, you can see 50% of the class felt that the assignment was unclear. Like, you can get a number on that. You could substantiate one or two of the feedback comments that you get. So I think there's a good mix of including quantitative questions versus the open-ended that's giving you qualitative feedback. Some methods for collecting that quantitative data would be like a Likert scale, where they're putting their rating from 1 to 5 and how they felt about something, or what they think about a certain item. You can also do a ranking scale. So I actually just did a survey for the tutors that I'm supervising this term, and I had like 6 or 7 items, and I said, well, I want to know about these items, but I don't need to know every single item on a Likert scale. So I'm having them rank them. What was their their favorite to their least favorite. So they're ranking it 1 through 7. And then that's a quick, instead of answering a question for each item, it's just one question. And then I do also follow up questions with an optional comment box, because it's hard to express your feelings about something by marking 1 through 5. Sometimes it's like, well, I think it's a 1, but I want to tell you more about why I didn't like that item. So I leaving plenty of options for them to clarify their response and leave comments. And then also, you do want to have some required questions, because there are certain items that I definitely want to get this information, but you also want to be careful about not having too many required questions, because then you won't get enough respondents to validate the survey. So two ways in which I'll send out surveys is through SurveyMonkey, or I've started using Microsoft Forms. SurveyMonkey has a 10-question limit, which is usually fine. Microsoft Forms is found in your Office 365 suite. So if you purchase Office 365, it'll be a part of that, along with Word, PowerPoint, Excel, things like that.
Right.
In Microsoft Forms, you can download into an Excel spreadsheet, so then I can save that, like spring 2019, and I can have that. SurveyMonkey, you have to pay extra to have it, to download it. So I think most people, does anyone have anything else that they use besides SurveyMonkey that would be useful to check out?
I only use SurveyMonkey, and it's useful and free, so I'm not exploring anything else, really.
How do you do a new survey each term, or do you just send them out the same survey link?
You know what? I just copy from my previous one, so I have a name of the course so that I get confused, because I can use the same questions for different courses. Just, copy and write Math 102 section 001 spring or whatever, and copy questions. I do sometimes change the question, either add or change, but not really often. It depends what course I teach, so but it's most of the questions are the same. But you can just
Yeah.
copy from the previous surveys and you reuse it. It's really easy. Once you create one, it's easy to add additional questions or some
Yeah.
kind of change there.
And then you have them. Then it saves it from.
Yeah.
And then you can just go back and see. Okay,
Yeah.
last year I did this.
So I have
Exactly.
it for everything. So I have it from last year, the year before, and since I have a course numbers, I use the section number also because if I teach two sections at the same, term, I want to make sure that the students see their section, and I have a term, spring 2020 or fall 2019, so I can compare them.
Oh yeah, perfect. Especially if you do it by course section, then okay, a morning class, versus an evening class, there might be differences. Yeah. That makes sense. Anyone else? Let's see. And then response rate. So I've noticed that 30% is an average across, other colleagues that I've talked to. We pretty much always get like a 30%, but a 60% is like ideal. I've been pushed to get 60%, but it's hard unless it's a face-to-face class and you do spend time in class doing it. It's hard sending out reminders, giving extra credit points. It's hard to get 60 response, but I have gotten it in the past. And what it's taken is frequent announcements, frequent reminder emails. It's taken a good amount of time in the last 2 weeks of class and even after class to continuously remind them to take this survey. But the more responses you get, the higher the validity of that survey is. So you're getting a more accurate picture of how that class felt versus basing the results on, 30% of the classes might only be 3 students if your class is if you have 10 students in the class. So the more responses you can get to your survey, the better. Selma, do you know kind of offhand what your response rate is?
You know what, as you said, if it's a face-to-face class and I give them at the end of the class, whoever is present that time, they will do it. That's definitely, and it can be 80-85%.
Yeah.
If it's not face-to-face class, I'm not sure, 40-50%, it depends. Once I gave them extra credit, a point, and I got 70%. It's still, some people don't care, even they get a point for that. So
yeah. Do you think it's worth, because it does take extra time when you do extra credit points, to collect up who did the survey? Okay, now I have to go in and I have to add it to their grade. Is that extra work worth it? Do you think you get enough from that?
It's not that big deal, really. I would do this, but honestly, I would rather give them extra credit for learning some stuff. So that's why I always put this. If you meet the tutors twice during the semester, you get some extra points at the end. I contact my tutor and know that, so it's fine. At least I think they get something from the tutors more than, I don't know. But some students, I don't think they need any extra help. They will go to the tutors and get the points, and also they will do the survey with or without extra points. So it depends of the student, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's they're going to do it anyways. I agree with you. Sometimes when I offer extra credit, they just hyper focus on this extra credit, and they don't pay attention to, well, you need to do really well on that last assignment. They think, oh, well, I'll just do the extra credit. I won't have to put as much time into this assignment. I'll be fine. So yeah, I am credulous, or I'm wary about all of these extra credit opportunities that aren't necessarily tied to something that I want them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's just some ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me show you one other thing, because when we talk about adding things into the survey to get more specifics, you still only have that 10 question limit, and you don't want to go too far into that. Let me show you a survey that I just did. Hold on. Because I was in SurveyMonkey. I only had 10 questions, and I wanted to get some really specific things. So I created this Likert scale. And again, it did take a while for me to create it, but once it's done, it's done. Let me see. Okay. So it was one question, and they're rating their response to statements on agree or disagree. So I felt confident in my embedded tutor position. I felt confused about my role and responsibilities as an embedded tutor. I felt satisfied in the frequency of the communication I received in my tutor position. I felt satisfied in the quality of the communication. So instead of just saying, did you feel I communicated with you? Like, I'm getting really specific things about the frequency and quality. I felt satisfied with the amount of time I had to complete tasks. So I could even pare this back a little bit more, but I felt this was a good way to get specific feedback on these statements. Like, I felt that the support I provided to students was beneficial to their academic success, like all really great things wrapped up into one question. And then I have an open-ended box to say, do you have any other comments, questions, or concerns? They're able to talk about each of these. But I think I'll have a higher success rate of getting feedback on these items if phrased in a Likert scale where they just have to click, 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 click. So when I showed you some of those statements before, they were lengthy, but if you kind of format it like this, it could be easy for students to kind of go through. And then you're getting specific feedback, even if you're not getting specific feedback on your open-ended questions. And I can always, if you're having any trouble setting this kind of question up, you can let me know, and I can go in and show you. But once you have it done, it'll be done.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully you found that helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. It was good seeing you. We're hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.